Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Feel Good for Men Who Want Change, where we talk about all things healthy masculinity. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to tell quite easily that I'm not recording this intro from a studio. And that's because my conversation with this week's guest, Will, was so great that I ran out of time and forgot to do it. So that's why I'm recording this one remotely. But the conversation with Will, as I said, was great. It was fantastic. Just a heads up, we talk about suicide in the episode, and that's because Will is an advocate for raising awareness for male suicide and male suicide prevention, having lost his father. We talk about Will's journey, we talk about his father in the episode, and we talk about how the movement has really moved on from what he went through when he first lost his father to where we are today. And Will's part in that, where he's one of his contributions alongside his fundraising is this beautiful short film he's made, which I'll include the link to, and you hear us reference a few times, called Heirlooms, all about the sort of intergenerational trauma that accompanies suicide. It's a moving episode, but I think there's a lot to take from it. Whether or not you've been affected by suicide, I think you'll find a lot to take away from it in terms of how men talk about these topics, how men show vulnerability, and what we can do to help ensure that fewer people have to go through this. So, as always, please enjoy this episode with Will Castle. All right, Will, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to finally be here.
Yeah.
Excited.
Excited. What, excited for this or excited for the fact that you're going to see Oasis tonight?
A bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably number one.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll message you after tomorrow and see how it goes. Well, look, thanks for coming on. Look, we've got loads to talk about, and I think hopefully things that are going to help a lot of people. But it'd be remiss not to start at the beginning. And, you know, when we first met, you know, you gave this really moving talk, and one of the things you spoke about was your childhood spent on yachts and private jets. So that might be a good way into your story. Tell us a bit about your childhood and your upbringing.
Sure. Well, I definitely didn't lead a conventional childhood, as you've alluded to. So, yeah, my parents divorced, separated when I was really, really young. I have no recollection of them ever being together. And I sort of lived this double life of like my mum living, you know, a nice, normal, inverted commas, middle class life. And then my dad, who made and lost fortunes, I would be on his private yacht, private jet. I didn't really fly on a commercial plane until I was 18. You know, mansion in Oxfordshire, penthouse in St. Moritz. It was like things that people can only dream of. You know, and I was very, very, very privileged to have lived a life like that. But because of the type of person my dad was, he kept me really grounded. I had a weekend job from the age of 15. I was working in Top Man on the floors.
Nice.
And I was cashing up, for those of you who remember Top Man, who are old enough to remember it. And yeah, it was a very, very unconventional upbringing, but I felt that my parents dealt with it pretty well, actually. Like I look back on my childhood with really fond memories, even though it was utterly bizarre and quite wild in places as well. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
And you've got siblings?
I have a half sister. Yeah. We don't really talk much at the moment. But I have a half sister, but I am my mum's only child. Yeah.
And you know, wealth is one thing, but in terms of like the house that you grew up in, like with your dad and your mum, was there love in the house? Did you feel supported alongside the wealth?
Well, no, I don't have any recollection of my parents ever being together. Like zero recollection. So to answer your question, though, no, love was not a word that was used very commonly in either household, to be perfectly honest. My mum is a very loving person. Doesn't say it that much, but you can tell the warmth from my mum, whereas my dad was like an alpha male. Yeah. Like very traditional, man's man, you know, men don't cry, like all of that type of stuff. And that was instilled in me from a really, really young age. Like
intentionally?
Intentionally. Like, yeah, very intentionally. You know, I have vivid memories of 7-8-year-old me being upset about things that kids get upset about and really holding back those tears because things would get pretty angry if tears were shown. It was a big thing in that household for sure.
Well, tell us a bit more about your father, because it seems like he was a larger than life figure, and obviously we'll come on to sort of what followed. But What was he like? How did his success come to be? And yeah.
So he grew up, he was adopted. He had a very tough childhood. His dad walked out on him and that, that has an effect on anyone. It really does. And my grandpa adopted him, and he lived on a council estate in Brent Cross. He went to a state school, and he lived a pretty tough life. He then moved out of home when he was about 15, and eventually moved to America, where he discovered his talent for property. And then when he came back here in the late 80s, he basically absolutely smashed it and took advantage of the 80s crash. He had some cash, and he was able to cash in and buy property at the right time, and made an absolute fortune, and was able to provide this life for me that one could only dream of. And I think he was this type of guy who, because he'd had such a troubled upbringing, he didn't want that life for me and my sister, and he wanted to give everything to make sure that we would live the best and most comfortable lives possible. But with that came a lot of sacrifice. He was up every day at 4:00, and boy, did you know about it.
Yeah.
Everyone knew about it. It was the thing that he used to shout from the rooftops about how hard he worked. Even on holiday, he was always on the phone. Every evening, always on the phone. He installed that work ethic in me as well. But I've now learned to balance it.
Yeah.
The balance is not something that he really had. He was that or nothing type of guy. But yeah, as I mentioned before, very old school in his views. Children should be seen and not heard. Men shouldn't cry. Women should look after the children, and men should provide. And that was the beliefs that he tried to push onto me. And as we all know now, in 2025, the world is a very different place.
Yeah.
So there were lots of positives and to some extent negatives about his character, just like everyone. Everyone has positives and negatives. But I would go to the point of say he was verging on sort of a toxic masculinity type of person.
And would you say that was something that he took from his adopted father, or he picked up from the culture around him?
No,
Do you not know?
I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. My grandpa was, my grandpa grew up in the 30s and the 40s, so things were really different. But I think he was a bit more gentle, my grandpa, than my dad. But grandparents always are, right? You've always got that memory of your grandpa when you've done something naughty, he winks at you and gives you a work as original or something like that. But so no, I don't think it was from his upbringing. I think it was more just the fact he was very determined to live a better life than he was given.
Yeah.
And he just was determined to be the best at everything that he did.
Yeah, and hard work being the way to that.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And for you as a boy growing up then, were you idolizing him?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. The only thing that mattered to me was to impress him.
Yeah.
And I just remember whenever I did something that I would get a lot of approval for, that was like the best moment of my life. I have vivid, picturesque memories of scoring my first goal in the football team where he was on the sidelines watching, and I can still see his face beaming with pride. And those are things that I just won't forget. My goal in life as a boy and as a teenager was to impress my dad.
Yeah.
And I don't really know why that is. I think it's just the effect he had on people. But yeah, I really I really did set out to impress him.
Did you have a sense as to your life being, I suppose, different to others? I mean, he was shaking hands with the Queen, playing polo with Prince Charles.
It's a really hard question to answer because you don't really think about it in the time.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I knew, my friends would come to my dad's house and be like, oh, wow, this is amazing. We've got a pool and, all this land and you drive quad bikes. And so I knew, and, the older you get, the more you realize. But I like to think I was quite modest and humble with it all because I still had that grounding from my mum. My mum is a very grounded person. She's very, very sensible. I have to give her big credit because she's the one who kind of made sure that my studies came first. Like she did, essentially she did the hard graft and my dad was the hero. And you got to look back on that and feel a bit of you got to give a lot of like credit to my mum for the role that she played, because that is not an easy role. She was the one giving the sort of discipline, and you know, I was the one swanning off on private jets and boats with dad, and she was the one making me do my homework and all of that type of stuff. So, but yeah, coming back to your question, yeah, I knew things were different, but we tried to kind of give my friends and people who I was hanging around with a sense of it all, and you know, try and make positive change around them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. What I'm thinking of is that perhaps despite them being separated, your dad was still playing, I guess, the traditional, you know, male role in the household, when your mum was doing more of the, I guess, unseen work, quote unquote, of, you know, caring and parenting.
Exactly. Yeah, spot on. Yeah, I mean, mum definitely had the harder. She drew the short straw in that relationship, for sure.
Absolutely. And look, you know, unfortunately, your dad died by suicide, and I guess is behind that presumably is some struggles that you weren't seeing.
Yep.
Can you walk us through a bit, you know, what happened there and your involvement in it?
So rewind to 2007, I'd just gone to university, and the great financial crisis had just happened, or was happening, and you could tell things were being scaled back. You could definitely tell things were being scaled back, but everyone was struggling. So that wasn't like, no alarm bells were ringing, right? You know, the boat went, the plane went, but we were still living a much, you know, well above normal life. And then when, you know, a couple of years on, you know, my dad obviously paid my rent at university, paid my university fees, and I started getting letters from the university saying my fees weren't being paid, and I started getting calls from the landlord saying my rent wasn't paid. And again, naively, I just thought, well, he's just forgotten or whatever. And I never really kind of put two and two. Maybe I didn't want, maybe I had my subconscious protecting me. Maybe I didn't want to put two and two together, but I didn't really put two and two together. And then I left uni in June 2010. I started work straight away. I literally took the weekend off and started work. And dad and I was working for a friend of his, and dad and I were looking for deals together. So we used to talk 7-8 times a day about deals and life and whatever. And it was only towards the end of his life, you know, he died in November 2010, and, you know, we're talking sort of August, September time, we were looking at some deals and they just very clearly didn't work. But he was desperate to try and make the numbers work, basically. And then I started to kind of see what was going on. And then, yeah, in November 2010, 17th of November 2010, I got a call from one of his mates. I was out for dinner with some friends, and they said, look, have you spoken to your dad today? And I said, well, I spoke to him this morning, but, you know, I haven't since. This was about 5 o'clock. And he said, well, you better try and get hold of him because he's just been made bankrupt. And at that point, I was like, shit.
Yeah.
And I spent all evening looking for him. I went to every single bar I knew he hung out in, every single hotel, called all of his friends. And then I knew where his car was parked. It was in a hotel car park. So I went to the car park. I spoke to the porter. I said, can I have a look in his car? Because just want some clues as to where he might be. And then I needed to charge my phone. So I charged my phone in the car, turned on the radio. And on the radio, I heard the central line is suspended because of someone under the tracks at Bond Street. And I was outside Bond Street station. And I called his friend and I said, you don't think that this could be Dad, do you? And he was like, don't be ridiculous, type thing. And I said to myself, I've just got to check. I've just got to cross it off the list. And I went to Bond Street. They told me to call the British Transport Police, and I called the British Transport Police, and yeah, it turned out to be him. And that's how I found out. Yeah, I mean, I still remember it like it was yesterday, unfortunately.
How old were you?
When he just turned 22.
Okay.
And, you know, nowadays 22 is not really a child, but I'd lived such a sheltered upbringing.
Yeah.
I had, you know, I'm not asking for sympathy here, but I went from having everything done for me and everything on a plate to just not overnight. And me and mum weren't really close at the time. I was a horrendous teenager and a horrendous 20-year-old. So we just weren't really seeing eye to eye, and I genuinely just had nowhere to turn. Yeah. I was like, fuck, I'm homeless, basically. Like, I don't know what to do. So yeah, that was without doubt the worst day of my life.
Yeah, understandably. And what about the sort of days and weeks that followed? Where did we find you there?
I went back to work. He died on Wednesday, took Thursday off and went back to work on Friday. obviously very stupidly. My head was just not in the right place. I had a good close group of friends, but we were kids. No one had ever really dealt with anything like that before. No one knew how to deal with it. No one knew how to speak about it. No one wanted to speak about it. Let's put it that way. I think it was a relief to people that I just didn't talk about it because it was awkward. And so I hid it all with drink and partying and doing things that 22-year-olds probably shouldn't do. And that got me through it in a weird sort of way. It helped mask what I was going through. It helped me deal with the reality of the situation. And luckily I didn't have any dependence or responsibility, so no real harm was done other than to my body.
To yourself. You know, when we met at this talk, you know, I was sort of stunned. You said you gave the eulogy and then sort of went back into work that afternoon, you know, brave face on it, crack on.
I remember standing on that stage. You know, Dad was quite a character. There was hundreds, if not thousands, of people at this funeral. I stood up and I gave the eulogy, and in my head I was like, do not cry, because Dad would not have wanted you to cry. So do not cry. And I didn't cry. And then afterwards I wore that as a badge of honour. I proudly told anyone who would listen that at this funeral with thousands of people, I stood up there and I did not cry. And looking back, I mean, how brave would it have been to cry in front of all those people? Because, you know, I was just a 22-year-old kid whose life had been turned upside down. Like, who wouldn't be crying? Yeah. But that was the toxic masculinity side of my dad screaming in my head to not show it.
Yeah. And that lesson that you'd taken on board so deeply that even in that moment, you know, that was strong enough to hold everything back.
100%.
And I mean, just practically speaking, after that, like, did you hold on to the job, or were you sort of then listlessly rolling around with this grief?
No, I held on to the job. I held on to the job badly, very badly. Look, I was working for a friend of Dad's. There was obviously empathy there, and I had a lot of rope. But there came a point where it was not tenable for me to be in that environment anymore because of the memories, because of what I associated with it. Going to Bond Street Station every day, being in the office, I just needed a fresh start. So I left, but something really important happened before I left, which I've forgotten to mention, is I met my wife. I met my wife 9 months after Dad died. So I was just about to turn 23.
Okay.
And that changed everything for the better.
How did you meet her?
We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, like at a dinner. I was wearing an extremely tight top that she and I still remember. And I went to go talk to her at the other end of the table because I really just wanted to end up talking to her friend, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. And we got talking, and then when I asked for her number at the end, she was like, "But you're gay, aren't you?" And I said, no, I'm not gay. Would love to take you for a drink. And she still says to me to this day, "I have no idea why I gave you my number. I really did not fancy you at all."
Wow, there's a lot of material there for the speech at the wedding.
Well, there was. And then life just got much better. She stumbled upon this guy who had lost his dad 9 months earlier in completely tragic circumstances. I didn't talk about it at all to anyone, but within 5 minutes I was telling her my life story. And like, fair play to her, taking on someone with all that baggage. There was a lot of baggage. But I don't know what I'd have done without her. She gave me like a bit of a purpose. She gave me something to live for again. Show that my life didn't have to revolve around this terrible tragedy that had happened to me, and that I can pick myself back up and build a new life. And it didn't have to have private planes, yachts and mansions, and it could just be a really nice, normal 2.4 children family life, which is one that I didn't grow up around, but one that I live now. And I couldn't be happier with it.
I mean, what a gift from her. What's her background?
2.4 family. The most normal family you'll ever meet in your life. Absolutely lovely. Her dad, who treated me like a son, unfortunately passed away a few years ago. Not in similar circumstances, may I add. Was just the most lovely, kind-hearted, humble, generous, just 10 out of 10 bloke.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get. And her mum, very similar. She grew up almost polar opposites in the most loving, beautifully humble household. And in parts I'm envious of that.
Yeah.
And in parts I'm not, because when bad things do happen, as they do to everyone, she struggles with it more than I do. Because she's not used to it.
Yeah.
Or she wasn't used to it. And they took me into their family, and it was just, there's just no turning back from there. It was exactly what I needed at that time.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant.
Amazing. And we'll come on to it when we talk about the short film Heirlooms that you've made, and how the intergenerationalness of this all matters. But I just wonder, you had that 9-month period, and we'll come on to a bit of sort of what men in general are going through. But obviously we've got the power of hindsight and time now. But back then, was anyone able to make sense of or have some ideas as to how your dad had reached that point without anyone knowing? Or am I making an assumption that no one knew sort of quite where he was at?
I still don't know today. There's a lot of things I don't know. And to be honest, I don't really want to know.
Yeah.
It's gone now. That part of my life I put it behind me. There's no point digging up the past because it's not going to change the future. So I put that part behind me. There are rumours that he had health issues. He wasn't in and out of hospital the whole time. We all know he had money issues. We all know that he prided himself on material things that he owned and could share, and we all knew that was a big part of his life. Look, when he died, hand on heart, no one saw it coming.
Yeah.
Like, he was just the last person you'd put in that bracket, and it was a massive shock. So, everyone who has gone through suicide, which is a unique type of grief. I've lost people to cancer, I've lost people to old age, but losing someone to suicide is just next level.
Yeah.
It's just not the same, because you're dealing with all the things you would be dealing with if you lost someone from natural causes, along with the anger, the unanswered questions, the confusion, and most importantly, the shame that comes with it. The anger is very difficult to deal with, because as much as I feel empathy for him to be in that situation where he thought there was no way out, I'm fucking angry with him. I'm really angry with him. Why did you leave me and everyone else in this situation? Like, I'm sad that you got to that point where you thought that was the option, but I'm really angry with you. Shame. Look, I had a lot of shame at the time, not so much anymore, because of the way in which society shifted. Don't get me wrong, it needs to shift a lot more. But look, when I went home from work on Friday, so he died on Wednesday, went home from work on Friday, he was on the front page of the Evening Standard on Friday afternoon, shaking hands with the Queen. And we looked very similar, very, very similar. So I'm sat on the tube, and I see all these people reading this newspaper with my dad's face all over the front. And I got out at the next stop and I went and bought a balaclava. And I sat on the tube wearing a balaclava because I just did not want to be associated with this situation. Yeah. Because I was just really embarrassed, if I'm honest.
And is that why, because I guess for about a decade, you didn't really talk about what happened.
Didn't talk about it at all.
What changed?
An accident. A complete accident. Me and my wife were just getting on with our lives. It was great. Yeah. During lockdown 2020, as most stories within this space start.
Yeah, it does come up a lot.
During lockdown, like, no one believes this, but this was all, I swear on my life, completely coincidence. I'd always wanted to do Movember purely to grow a moustache. I have half decent facial hair, and it was a good excuse to try and look like Salvador Dali. Or Freddie Mercury, or Borat, as everyone calls me. Yeah. And it just so happened to be November 2020, which was exactly 10 years since Dad had passed. And I said to my wife, I want to grow a moustache. And she said, no, you look like a tit. And then I actually looked at what Movember did and I was like, oh, it's a mental health charity. I could do something around losing dad to suicide. That would be nice on the 10-year anniversary. Why not? Genuinely not thinking anything of it. Put up a very nonchalant social media post along the lines of, I've lost my dad to suicide. I'm raising money for Movember. Please sponsor my moustache. And I started raising a lot of money very, very quickly. Lots of messages of support. And it gets addictive. It gets really addictive. And then I started posting about it, posting stories, posting obituaries, posting all this type of stuff. And it was quite cathartic. It was really cathartic, actually. And then I started raising a lot of money, and then Movember got in touch and they wanted to kind of, help me make more money for them, obviously. And I decided, no, I didn't decide. I did decide. I decided to write the story about what happened on the day that I shared earlier. And I told my wife I was going to do it, and she was like, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's a bit too triggering." And I said, "No, look, that's what I want to do. I hope it works." And I shared it, and I raised, I think it was $3,000 in one day or something like that. And that was the start of the journey. And then Movember asked me to come on board as an ambassador, start sharing my story. And look, it's a two-way street. I get some, joy is the wrong word. I get comfort from it. I find it cathartic. They get someone sharing their story in the aim to raise money. And it was a really good relationship. And I met a lot of amazing people doing that. I did that for 3 years. I traveled up and down the country sharing my story. It's a great community there. I still see all the staff from Movember. I still got all the friends. Like it was a great segue into this side hustle.
Yeah. And how did the people respond, who some of whom presumably knew what you've been through and knew you through the period of silence and then this change?
It's weird because my friends, I can say what I want because they won't listen to this podcast, which kind of tells you everything that you need to know. My friends are still very traditional men. Yeah. I don't know if that's on purpose or it just kind of is the way that they are. Look, people obviously say, oh, what you're doing is great and blah, 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 and pat on the shoulder, pat on the back, etc. But it's not something we talk about as a group of friends, which is how I sort of met Josh, who is our mutual friend, because I love my friends. I love hanging out with my friends because we've been friends since we were, in some cases, 5, 6, 7 years old. And we can be idiots together. We can do stupid shit. We can do all the things that boys do together. But I need other things as well. Yeah. And that's where I get my... So, the mensch community, you had Josh on last week, that's where I get my spiritual, mental needs, So, yeah, in answer to your question, it's not really spoken about amongst my social peers.
Mostly men?
Mostly men, and their partners are my friends as well. But as you know, when you have kids, it becomes harder to socialize in couples. So yeah, I'd say mostly men.
Yeah. And with the new parents that you meet with kids, it's not always, I guess, the easy
it's
intro.
Not an easy, no. Look, people see it. I'm very public about it. Yeah. I'm very open with my story. I am an open book. I feel no shame. I feel that only good can come from me talking about it, apart from people getting bored. Yeah. So that's why I am an open book. That's why I sit on this stage. And that's why I say, if anyone wants to ask me any questions, I will take no offense because no one means any harm by anything they're asking. They're just genuinely curious.
Absolutely. And to me, that is just so interesting that even among your social group, there is still, I guess, some of that machoism that prevented your dad perhaps getting the help he might have needed, right? Or sharing some of the struggles. And even though society has changed and the culture around men has changed and is changing, there's still this element of, awkwardness and taboo around talking about not even something as specific as male suicide, but just getting help when you're struggling.
Yeah. I have friends who have gone through some pretty dark stuff over the past few years, and I'm sure others have as well that haven't shared it with me. But it's always, the conversation is always kept quite within a very, very tight group. And I think there's quite a lot of that traditional machoism where there is shame in not being able to be the best version of you. And if you are struggling and you aren't the best version of you, there is no shame in that, because I can give you quite a good example, actually. I came home having done the opening speech at Heirlooms the other night, not the other night, a few months ago. And my wife said to me, like, in a jovial way, she was like, "You're such a fraud, aren't you?" I was like, "What do you mean I'm a fraud? Like, what?" And she was like, proper going for me, like really laying into me, like, you know, you swan around that stage, like you're the be all and end all. And like, people don't know what you're really like. I was like, but that is what I'm really like. And they're like, well, no, you're not, because sometimes you're grumpy, you fart in bed, you pick your nose, you're all this type of shit. And I was like, well, hang on. When I'm on that stage, I'm on stage for 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. It's very easy to be 10 out of 10 for 10 or 15 minutes. It's very easy. But you see me when I'm 1 out of 10, when I'm 2 out of 10, when I'm 0 out of 10. And that's what it's all about. We all go through 1s, 2s, 3s, like, and it's impossible to be 10 out of 10 all the time. So you are going to have ups and downs in your life, and being able to get a good support network around you to be able to deal with that, and to be able to actually be open and honest about it and say, actually, you know what, I'm probably a 4 today, and today's probably going to be a bit of a difficult day. It's fine. Yeah. Just admit it to yourself, and it'll make it a lot easier. You don't have to hide away from it. And that's my outlook on things like that.
Your wife sounds amazing, by the way.
Oh, don't tell her that.
And I'm curious about the change you saw in yourself, or did you see a change in yourself when you went through this period of, I guess, sharing and advocacy? Yeah. Had you had any sort of, I don't want to call it like a therapeutic intervention, but had you done anything, any work prior to that? No, nothing.
Nothing. Probably tried counselling months after it happened.
Yeah.
Like, to no real avail. When you say work, you mean like
counselling, coaching, I don't know, any kind
nothing.
Of
I just wasn't even on my radar. It was just like I'd put it to the back of my mind and I just got on with my life. But then there was, with the benefit of hindsight, there was an underlying grief there that just wasn't dealt with. It was just building, and who knows what would have happened had I not discovered this great new side of my life.
Yeah, because when I think about the arc of your sort of journey, you know, this feels like, and that moment feels like your sort of step into service, you know, which in the sort of 12-step world, you know, I've come through the AA piece, like that is the final step, right? Is like to sort of give yourself to others, to serve as a way to heal.
Yeah, unintentionally, but if I'm being really honest, I think the serving others is a bit of a byproduct.
Yeah.
It's a lovely unintentional consequence. I'm glad my story helps people and it gives people solace, and it gives me immense pride and joy that it does that. And every message I get and every person who comes up to me after a talk, I am so incredibly grateful for that. And it gives me butterflies just saying that. But it helps me. This is my therapy. My therapy is talking about it publicly.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's, but that's great. That's how it works, right? Like it's a step, you know, because it works. And the reason it works is because, yes, you're helping others, but in doing so, you're helping yourself. And that's kind of the point. Does that resonate with you at all? That sort of step into service?
100%. But what's really interesting is that, you know, I mentioned earlier that me and my sister don't talk anymore. And the reason is because of this. She is the total opposite to me. She's a very private person, and she hates, I think, I don't know, still hates this whole public persona that I've built, because she feels that it's something private that needs to be kept private. And I disagree with that.
Yeah. Well, look, I think one of the reasons why this topic does need to be spoken about, and why I think what you're doing is so powerful, is the sort of numbers around male suicide, around suicide bereavement, which are huge. What have you learned from, I guess, connecting with others who've been through it?
That I would say most people who you meet and speak to have probably are connected, have been bereaved by suicide in some way, shape or form, however many layers there are behind it. You know, stark statistics in the UK, 6,000 people die from suicide each year. On average, they have 5 or 6 first-degree relatives. That's 36,000 people bereaved by suicide each year. 1 in 3 of them will think about taking their own life. How many is that? A third of 36. 12. 12,000 people.
Yeah.
Out of those 36,000, 1 in 10 will attempt to take their own life.
Yeah.
3,500 people. And that's all as a result of generational trauma. That's all as a result of losing someone else. So the effect trickles down. And that is essentially what I tried to stop with the film that I created that you spoke about earlier.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that, and I'll definitely include the film in the show notes because it's so moving. But in your experience and with the knowledge you've gained, like, why do you think the numbers are higher for men than they are for women of those who die by suicide?
Because all of the things we spoke about earlier about what my dad was holding in, women are naturally more akin with their emotions, more akin with their feelings, more open about sharing with their friends. I get very jealous of my wife in all of her WhatsApp groups, talking to her friends about everything, the amount they whinge about our children and the amount they whinge about their husbands.
Yeah.
My mates don't do that. We talk about if Arsenal are going to sign Victor Gyökeres. Yeah. Like that's what we talk about. Yeah. Like there's no layered emotion. Like if I receive a text from a friend saying, how you do, like it just doesn't happen. And I get really, quite envious about that. And in my opinion, that is the reason why suicide is so male heavy. Like men tend to carry the burden. They tend to feel collectively responsible for their families. I'm not saying women don't, but I'm saying just men deal with it in a very toxic way. Whereas women just are better at understanding that some things are out of their control and that's just how it is. Whereas men, I feel, would take it more to heart and, eventually those results can be quite catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely. They take it to heart and then just keep it all for themselves until they can no longer keep it. What do you think needs to change or what spaces or conversations need to happen for that to be less true? I mean, you've spoken about Mensch and for those who haven't heard that episode, that is a community for men that was set up by a mutual connection of ours, which is kind of a men's circle, right? A men's group.
Mensch has given me a new part of my life, which has been so important in my growth to find, essentially strangers, because a lot of these people are strangers or were strangers, where you can just connect with on an emotional level and there's no judgment, there's no point scoring. I'll sit amongst multi-millionaire CEOs and garbage men. And there's no hierarchy, there's no labels. We're all there for a purpose and it's to kind of share your emotion and what you are going through on your individual journey at that point in time. And there needs to be more Menschers. But not just that, there needs to be a situation where if you're not getting everything that you need from your social circle, there is another group that you can find and it needs to be easy to find. And I think that there's a lot of them happening now, which is great. A lot of the Andy's Men's Club and all of that type of stuff. I know in Brighton they've got Dad La Soul, which is amazing. Personally, when I became a father nearly 8 years ago, I really struggled. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
100%.
Like the Dad La Soul thing, I think is a brilliant idea because I remember sitting there after like 2 or 3 months of Arthur being born, he's just crying and tidying up his shit and feeding him and like not sleeping. I was just like, people say this is the best time of their life. No, it's fucking not. It's really shit.
Objectively.
And I just was like bursting to be able to tell someone, but all my entities, I was like, this is great. I really love it.
No.
That's not healthy.
Yeah.
That's really not healthy. And society puts these things on you that you have to be in a certain way. But if we're all just honest with each other, it will take a lot of the bullshit away.
100%, yeah. Honest with each other, and you just made me think about when we were a similar age, when we were becoming dads, like the only books were like
Fatherhood. Great book.
Well, no, there was one I was thinking, there was like some Marine Dad or like something like that, which was basically, how to parent like a soldier, like turning nappy changing into a military routine and that kind of thing. It's like, you're a man. There you go.
Did you read Fatherhood? Because Fatherhood was actually Fatherhood gave the real, like, they basically say you're going to have a shit time for 6 months.
Interesting.
So just like deal with it. Basically.
I've never heard of that one.
It was I read it before Parenthood, actually. I thought
Did it help?
Oh, it really helped.
Yeah.
It just made me think, like, okay,
yeah.
like, just, batten down the hatches.
Yeah.
And look, yes, fatherhood is the most rewarding thing in the world. But for me, the first year of both of them,
yeah, exactly. It definitely gets easier as they get older.
Yeah.
And look, another thing that can help is storytelling.
Yep.
And you did that with this amazing short film called Heirlooms. Tell us a bit about the origins of that. How did that come to be?
Again, coincidental. No one believes all these stories, but they are genuinely true. So Luke Bruckner, who is a very old friend of mine, we went to school together. We've known each other since we were 13. Went to uni together.
Yeah.
And then subsequently, post-university, lived together. So he was living with me on the night that Dad died. Just me and him. And he was a management consultant at the time. And we went through that, what can only be described as a hellish period together. And then, we kind of went our separate ways, drifted through life, and Luke decided he wanted to be a director. Okay. Which at the time I was like, really? But yeah, he became a director and he is very good at it. He's extremely successful. And he has produced... Luke lost both his parents very, very young. Very, very young. Within pretty quick succession of each other. And he created a film about child bereavement and what happens.
Yeah.
And I went to one of his premieres, again by chance. I was actually supposed to be away that night, and one thing led to another and I couldn't go, so I ended up going to his premiere. I watched his premiere and I was like inspired. Yeah. It was just the most beautiful piece of work I'd seen. And I've still got the text. I messaged him that night saying, no, not that night, the next morning, saying, I've been thinking, can we do something about suicide? And he just replied straight away saying, yeah, let's do it.
Amazing.
And that was it. Yeah. And 2 years later, with a lot of late nights, a lot of fundraising, a lot of hard work, we created something that I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah, and you should be. I watched it again knowing that you were coming on, and yeah, it brought me to tears. And I'll include the link, but could you just give us sort of an abridged version of what the film shows?
At first, I wanted to tell the story of what happened to me on the night I discovered Dad died. And then I thought to myself that doesn't really tell the full story. That just tells a story of a tragedy that happened that night. And yeah, it's great TV. Yeah. But it didn't really set out to achieve anything. And then I thought about the numbers, and I thought about the care that I received afterwards. And I thought about the amount of people that are bereaved by suicide and what they go through, not just on that night, but on a daily basis. Every big moment, every wedding, every graduation, every birth of a child, longing for the person that you lost. And I wanted to tell that as a story, because I didn't want to just tell my story. I wanted to tell the story of the 36,000 people that are bereaved by suicide each year. And we created a film that shows the impact of suicide amongst families and how that trauma can pass down through generations if not dealt with. And we did it in collaboration with a charity called Suicide & Co., who are, believe it or not, one of the only charities in the UK who deal with specialist suicide bereavement counselling. As I said before, suicide bereavement is very unique. So there needs to be a unique type of treatment for it, counselling. And it's very, very limited, the services in the UK. Right. Considering the numbers, quite remarkable how limited the service is. So we teamed up with this charity. We wanted to put them on the map. We wanted to raise their profile, and we wanted to help them raise much needed money. And I think we did that. Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, it was backed by West Ham. It's been featured in Metro, viewed over 3 million times. Is that right? 3.5 million. Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Well, I mean, what's that reception been like, and those partnerships? It was very humbling. It was eye-opening. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. But Luke said to me, he was like, when we finished it and it was done, and we were about to premiere it in front of all these people, we did a premiere of the Curzon Soho, and he said to me, he was like, and he was so right, he goes, well, tonight is going to be one of the best nights of your life, and you're going to love it. we've created a masterpiece, if I do say so myself. And people are going to love it. But I'm warning you now, you're going to go on a ride for a couple of months and then it's going to finish very quickly. So enjoy it while it lasts. And he was so right.
Oh, wow.
He was so right. We rode the wave for a couple of months and it was brilliant. And, you get a lot of plaudits and you get a lot of publicity. And then it just goes. And then the next thing is on people's lips. We did win a couple of awards recently and it kind of increased it a little bit there. So that was great. But the new age of social media, people pick things up and put them down very, very quickly.
Yeah, well, we'll give it another boost, hopefully. What do you hope someone watching the film takes away?
I just want people to be seen and understood. And I just want people to watch it and think, shit, other people go through this as well. This is how it feels. And like, oh, wow, yeah. I go through this and this is normal and I can resonate with that. And I just want people to get a bit of comfort from that. Yeah. That's all.
When did it come out?
February this year.
Okay, yeah. So your kids were well born, older now. Like you could experience making the film and the narrative within it as a father.
Arthur's in it.
Is he in it? Is he the boy?
Arthur's the boy. No. We were in the background. So as we're going across the.
I thought he was the little lad.
He's not. The little lad is Arthur's age.
Right. Okay.
The little lad is Arthur's age, and it's funny you bring that up because I'm talking about generational trauma passing down. How can we stop that? Again, very coincidentally, about 8 weeks ago, Arthur came home from school. He'd had a really difficult day at school. He was very upset, clearly angry. Something had clearly happened. And he was screaming to me and my wife, I hate my life. I want to die. I don't want to exist anymore. Blah, 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 blah. And my wife's looking at me thinking, like, are you okay? Like, is this triggering for you? And I'm like, yeah, obviously it's very triggering.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And she kind of took me to one side and she was like, maybe you should tell him. And I was like, tell him what? She was like, don't be silly. Tell him about your dad. He knew my dad had died. He didn't know how my dad had died.
Right.
So I took him upstairs and I said to him, look, Arthur, I understand you're really angry at the moment, but you've said some things that are pretty serious. Like, I didn't say, do you mean them? I said, look, my daddy felt the same way too. You know how my daddy died? And he said, yeah, he fell in front of a train. I said, well, what if I told you he didn't fall in front of the train, but he jumped in front of the train? And Arthur was like, what do you mean? He died on purpose. And I said, yeah, he died on purpose because he didn't want to be here anymore. And like, he just was shocked. He was like, what does that mean? And I said, but you said you didn't want to be here anymore. Is that what you mean? And he was like, no, that is not what I mean. He couldn't understand the concept of what he'd said versus the actual reality of what it means. Yeah. And I think that conversation, I hope that conversation, and I do think it as well, was impactful.
Yeah.
I think he understood, because I said to him, look, it was, can you imagine how that made me feel? My daddy wanting to die. And I think he got it.
Yeah.
I for an 8-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's young, but the act of having the conversation is the gift, really. Yeah. Right? I mean, who knows what the right way is to deliver that information?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But I think we both grew up in an era where our dads didn't even have those kinds of conversations, didn't talk about those kinds of things. And, talking about like spreading the word that you're spreading, I had a similar conversation with my son this morning because he asked me what I was doing in London today.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I explained. He knows I do a podcast. He said, what are you talking about? And I sort of told him a bit about your story. And so, that's 2 young boys who will at the very least understand that, sometimes we feel things and, if we don't talk about those things, sometimes it can take us to bad places. Yeah. Like, what a gift.
Yeah, I hope so. Look, and then when he grows up, he'll see the film, he'll understand.
Yeah.
And the film is basically trying to tell people, don't hold it in, because if you hold it in, bad things can happen.
Yeah.
And what harm is it just to get it out? So yeah, please watch it if you're listening, and I hope that if you have lost someone to suicide, it speaks to you, and if you haven't, it helps you understand what someone may be going through.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, we'll get the link out there, and make sure as many people see it as they can. I can't think of better words to draw this to a close with than those. So is there any other messages you'd want men to hear who are listening today, or any final thoughts?
Look, I think everything we've said is very relevant to today, but just to practice what I preach, have a look on my website, and if anything resonates with you, please do reach out if you feel you need to. Like, my email inbox is always open, and more than willing to try and help in any way I can.
Amazing. All right, man. Well, look, thank you again so much for coming in. I know this, can't be easy to talk about, but you do it beautifully. The film's brilliant, and keep up the good work.
Cool. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, man. So there you go. That was my conversation with Will Castle. I hope you enjoyed it. And look, it was a difficult topic at times, an emotional conversation, but I hope for reasons that are pretty clear now, it's important that we don't avoid those conversations, but that we have them, that we lean into them, that people like Will fundraise and they raise awareness to it, and they make these beautiful contributions to the conversation, as he's done with his short film Heirlooms, which I'll include a link to in the show notes. So I hope you took something from it, and whether it's something that you've been impacted by personally, or you've just seen some of the headlines that are out there around the numbers surrounding male suicide, hopefully this was something for you to take away and ponder on. So, as always, please, if you haven't already, like, subscribe and share this episode with another man who might need to hear it. And that is how we will continue to grow this movement, man by man, story by story. Work hard, be kind, and I will catch you at the next one.